Have you ever stared into the face of someone who shares your blood and understood, truly understood, that you'd become nothing but a line item they wanted erased? $32. That was everything I had while November rain cut through my jacket like it wasn't even there. I hadn't blown it on bad decisions. My shoulder tore at the factory, cost me the job, and my older brother Derek decided that made me dead weight. Before that day ended, I'd bet my last $30 on a rusted storage unit and crack open a $4 million secret that would drag his lies into the light. But in that moment, I was just a man holding a black trash bag with nowhere to go. "It's purely a business matter, Caleb," Derek said from the doorway of the house where we'd both grown up. The house our mother left to both of us. Somehow he'd maneuvered himself into position as sole executor of our mother's estate. He wouldn't look at me. Brenda stood behind him, arms folded, wearing that particular expression, half pity, half clock watching. "I lost my job because of my shoulder, Derek," I said. My voice could barely compete with rain hammering the porch's tin roof. "Quote 2, quote 3, he fired back, jaw going tight. Quote 4. His boot shoved a heavy black trash bag across the threshold toward me. 30 years of brotherhood, dissolved by some overdue utility bills and a medical expense I couldn't cover. My fists were balled so tight my knuckles ached, but I didn't swing. I bent down, hauled that bag onto my good shoulder, and left the driveway without turning around. 3 miles I walked along Route 8's shoulder, cars blasting past, throwing freezing slush across my jeans. I found shelter under the sagging awning of a boarded-up diner, dropped my bag on filthy concrete. My hands shook as I dug into a wet pocket to count what I had left. A wrinkled 20, a 10, 2 singles, $32. Not enough for a motel. Not even enough for a bus ticket to anywhere that mattered. I stood there staring at damp bills, running the math on how many days of dollar menu meals they'd buy. That's when a bright neon orange sign across the 4-lane highway grabbed my eye. "Secure all storage. Public auction today. 2 o'clock in the afternoon." I checked my phone. Screen shattered but readable. 1:45 p.m. I'd watched those storage auction shows on TV. Loud personalities cracking open units to find safes stuffed with gold, rare collectibles worth thousands. I also knew the truth. Most abandoned units hold water-stained mattresses, broken Christmas ornaments, and the sad wreckage of lives that fell apart. But desperation does something strange to your logic. The alternative was sitting under that awning, clutching $32 while the cold slowly ate me alive. I needed something. A distraction, a long shot. I crossed the highway, nearly clipped by a semi doing 60, and hauled my trash bag through the gates of Secure All Storage. The crowd was thin, maybe 10 people standing under umbrellas, following a heavy-set man with a clipboard and a voice that carried like a cannon. Jim Lawson, local auctioneer, known for speed and zero patience. "All right, folks, listen up," Jim barked, swiping rain off his face. "Standard rules. Door goes up, you look from the threshold. Don't cross the line. Don't touch a thing. Cash only, due on the spot. You buy it, you haul it out by tomorrow sundown. Moving on to Unit 114. I drifted to the back of the group. These were regulars, you could tell. Greg Miller was there, pawnshop owner with a reputation for ruthlessness, wearing a leather duster, gnawing on a wet, unlit cigar. Beatrice, the antique dealer with eyes that missed nothing. A handful of scrap metal hunters looking for cheap copper and salvageable appliances. Unit 114 rolled open. Inside sat a pristine leather sectional, multiple flat-screen televisions, and rows of neatly organized plastic bins. Bidding opened at $200 and shot to $800 within moments. Greg Miller claimed the win with a smug grin. Unit 128 went for $400. Unit 205 sold for $650. With every padlock Jim cracked open, my hope shrank a little more. I was an intruder at a rich man's game. My $32 meant nothing here. By the time we reached the back section of the facility, the oldest, most neglected stretch, where corrugated metal roofs wore thick stains of rust, the crowd had thinned considerably. Rain hammered harder. The temperature kept falling. Quote _7__. Jim sighed, guiding us toward Unit 402. Orange paint curled off the door in long, brittle strips. Quote _8__. Jim nodded to the facility manager, who stepped forward with heavy bolt cutters and bit through the rusted padlock. It snapped with a sharp crack. Jim grabbed the handle and hauled the metal door upward. It screamed on its tracks, shedding flakes of rust like dead skin. The smell hit us instantly, a choking wall of mildew, rotting cardboard, and stale earth. Several people in the group physically flinched. Greg Miller aimed his powerful flashlight into the darkness and laughed out loud. Complete devastation. The unit was stuffed floor to ceiling with wreckage, a mangled bicycle frame eaten through with rust, stacks of cardboard boxes that had collapsed under a bad roof leak, a shredded futon hemorrhaging yellow stuffing, and beyond that, just debris. No furniture silhouettes, no plastic containers, nothing but waterlogged, ruined garbage. Greg sneered, already turning his back. Beatrice didn't even raise her flashlight. She shook her head and started walking toward her van. All right, don't everyone rush at once, Jim said dryly. Someone give me $50. 50 for the entire lot. Do I hear 50? Nothing. Just rain tapping asphalt. Come on, people. I need this unit cleared. $30. Somebody give me 30. There's got to be scrap metal in there at least. $30. My hand drifted toward my pocket on its own. Fingertips brushed the crumpled 20 and the 10. If I bought this, I'd have $2 left. $2. But standing there, staring into that dark, dripping mouth of Unit 402, something moved through me. Cold that had nothing to do with wind. A pull deep in my gut I couldn't explain. Call it instinct. Call it the recklessness of a man with absolutely nothing left to protect. Before logic could catch up, my voice cut through the rain. 30, I'll take it. Every remaining head swiveled toward me. Greg Miller stopped mid-step, looked me up and down, soaked clothes, washed-out face, black trash bag slumped at my feet. He let out a low, pitying laugh. Enjoy the dump, kid, Greg muttered, flipping his collar up as he walked away. Jim Lawson studied me with something between surprise and sympathy. $30 to the young man in the denim jacket. Going once, going twice, sold. I walked up to Jim with hands shaking so badly I could barely fish the damp bills from my pocket. 120, 110. I pressed them into his palm. Jim handed me a receipt and a fresh padlock for the door until I could empty the unit. You've got 24 hours to clear it, son, he said quietly, watching me shiver. Don't leave a single piece behind, or the facility will hit you with a fine. I understand, I whispered. Jim climbed into his truck and pulled away, and right then, the full weight of what I'd done crashed over me. I stood alone in freezing rain, staring into a 10 by 10 metal coffin packed with rotting garbage. I had just surrendered my last shred of security for another person's trash. My knees buckled against the wet asphalt. I buried my face in my hands and let out a broken, wretched sob. I don't know how long I stayed there on the soaked pavement. Eventually, the cold forced me upright. The storage facility stood all but empty. Main gates had been locked to vehicles, though a pedestrian exit still worked. Grey afternoon was bleeding into a deep, starless dark. I hauled my trash bag into the unit, out of the rain, and yanked the rolling door halfway down as a windbreak. Inside, total blackness. I fished out my phone, opened the flashlight app, balanced it on an overturned chair. A weak cone of light carved into the chaos. Quote, _20, I whispered, breath curling white in the freezing air. Quote, 21, I started at the front, pulling destroyed items out one at a time. The labor generated some heat, but every object I moved crushed something inside me a little further. The cardboard boxes had essentially dissolved. The moment I tried lifting one, its bottom gave way, spilling clumps of moldy, water-fused magazines across the concrete. National Geographics from the 1980s. Pages welded together by moisture, worth absolutely nothing. Then came the futon mattress. Years of roof leaks had turned it into a waterlogged slab. I dragged it toward the threshold, gasping. My bad shoulder lit up with that sharp, familiar fire. By 10 o'clock that night, I'd cleared the front half of the unit. The refuse sat in a mountain just beyond the door. I was destroyed, starving, coated head to toe in dust and black mold spores. My phone battery read 15%. I dropped onto an overturned plastic bucket and stared at what remained. The back half of the unit hid beneath a large canvas tarp. Heavy-duty material, military grade from the look of it, blanketed in years of accumulated grime. But unlike everything in the front section, the tarp appeared to have done its job. Whatever it covered had been spared the water damage. I grabbed the stiff edge of the fabric, pulled hard. A thick cloud of dust erupted, and I doubled over, coughing. When the air cleared, I pointed my dying flashlight toward the rear wall. There, untouched by the rot and ruin surrounding them, sat 5 heavy, dull grey metal bars stacked together. Each one roughly the size of a standard red brick. They'd been coated in some cheap matte grey primer, flaking off in patches. They were propping up a massive antique steamer trunk. The trunk itself was stunning. Completely wrong for this graveyard of abandoned junk. Dark mahogany, heavy brass corner reinforcements, dual iron lock clasps, leather straps across the top, dry, cracked, but holding. Dead center, a tarnished brass plate was fixed to the wood. Ornate cursive engraving. E. H. Sterling. My heart stopped mid-beat. Sterling. I'd lived in Akron my whole life. Anyone who knew Rust Belt history knew that name. Elisha H. Sterling, industrial titan of the 1920s. A man who'd owned half the steel mills in the state before his family's empire mysteriously disintegrated in the 1970s. The local legend said the fortune hadn't vanished through bad investments. A paranoid heir had hidden it. But that was folklore, bar talk. Surely this was just an old piece of furniture. I knelt in front of the trunk, reached for one of the grey bars beneath it, meaning to slide it aside. The instant my fingers closed and I pulled, my arm wrenched downward. I gasped. The bar struck concrete with a deafening clang. Far too heavy, impossibly heavy. Not iron, not steel. High school chemistry flooded back, density calculations racing through my skull. I grabbed the flathead screwdriver I'd salvaged earlier from the trash and scraped it hard across a bar's peeling grey surface. The primer flaked off instantly. Underneath, catching the dim beam of my phone's dying light, a bright, unmistakable buttery gleam. Not silver. Gold. My breath locked in my chest. I scraped harder, tearing strips of grey paint away. Stamped into the shining metal beneath were the words Credit Suisse, 400 ounces, fine gold, 999.9. I couldn't recall the exact spot price of gold, but I knew it hovered somewhere around $2,000 an ounce. My mind stalled mid-calculation. 1 bar alone, over $800,000. 5 of them sat on that concrete floor. I threw myself backward, scrambling from those bars like they might burn me alive. My lungs locked. Air wouldn't come. More than $4 million in solid gold bullion, sitting in a storage unit I'd bought for $30. Somebody had coated them grey to look like industrial scrap, buried them under a heap of worthless junk, hidden in plain sight. But why? Who had left them here? My eyes drifted upward, past the gold, past the floor, to the mahogany trunk the bars had been propping up. If $4 million in bullion was just a glorified furniture leg, what was inside the box? I crawled toward the trunk on hands and knees. My fingers shook so badly the flashlight beam danced across the walls. 2 iron clasps held the lid shut, each fitted with heavy vintage brass locks. I had no key. I snatched the rusty tire iron I'd pulled from that wrecked bicycle earlier, jammed the flat end under the right clasp, threw every pound of my weight onto the bar. Old wood groaned, then a violent crack as screws ripped free from the mahogany, shearing the lock clean off. Did the same on the left side. Brass tore the skin from my knuckles. I didn't feel it, not even slightly. I flung the tire iron away, drew one long breath, and heaved the domed lid open. Cedar, aged paper, machine oil. The smell rolled out like a ghost exhaling. The interior was bone dry. Lined in red velvet, pristine as the day it was fitted. 3 objects rested on top of that velvet: a thick ledger bound in leather, a heavy canvas bank bag crimped shut with a lead seal, and a plain manila envelope. I went for the ledger first, cracked the stiff leather cover, page after page of handwritten accounting, entries stretching back to 1982. These weren't business transactions. They were lists, names, dates, and large dollar figures marked only as __, quote, _22, __. As I scanned those names, the blood left my face entirely. These weren't random people. The former chief of police, the previous 2 mayors of Akron, state judges, a prominent real estate developer who currently owned half the downtown district. And there, 3rd page, next to a $50,000 cash payout dated 1985, was a name I knew like my own heartbeat. Arthur Mercer, my father. A low-level city inspector who died 10 years ago. Left behind nothing but debt and a modest house. Yet this ledger showed him collecting substantial off-the-books payments from the Sterling family for an entire decade. My phone buzzed hard in my pocket, so sudden it jolted me like a gunshot. The ledger slipped from my hands. Battery warning, 5%. I grabbed the manila envelope and ripped it open. 1 typed sheet of paper, 1 black and white photograph. The photo showed my father, years younger, standing right here in front of this very storage facility, shaking hands with a man I'd never seen before. The typed letter bore a date, the 14th of October, 1999. It read, __, quote, _23, __. I read those words again and again, until the letters dissolved into shapes without meaning. Derek, the brother who had just thrown me out into the rain, the brother who swore our parents died with nothing. He didn't know. Derek had never come for this unit. Must have lost the paperwork, or figured the whole thing got auctioned off years ago when the payments lapsed. He'd walked away from his hidden fortune, and through some cruel joke the universe was playing on both of us, I just bought it back for my last $30. That's when I heard it. Outside the rolling metal door, tires grinding slow across wet gravel. Headlights sliced through the gap beneath the door, throwing long shadows across the gold bars. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps cut through the puddles, moving with purpose toward Unit 402. underscore underscore quote underscore 24 underscore underscore. A rough, familiar voice shouted above the rain. Greg Miller. I killed the flashlight. Total darkness swallowed me. My heart slammed against my ribs like something caged and desperate. Outside, those heavy, splashing steps drew closer, grinding loud against the wet gravel. They stopped just inches from the half-rolled corrugated metal door. Greg Miller's gravelly voice bounced through the damp air. "I know you're in there. Roll it up." Panic flooded my chest. I jammed the manila envelope and the leather-bound ledger deep into the inside pocket of my soaked denim jacket. Moving with desperate quiet, I snatched the heavy military canvas tarp and flung it back over the mahogany trunk and the 5 gold bars. I pressed the fabric down flat, praying that thick canvas would hide the unmistakable outline of a multi-million-dollar fortune. 20 minutes later, we stood at the rear of the unit. I scraped the grey paint from the nearest bar, and beneath it, flawless, buttery gold caught the dim light. Tom physically stumbled backward. "Caleb, is that 400 ounces?" His voice barely above a whisper. "Each. And that trunk holds evidence that we put my brother in federal prison." Tom's face went stone hard. We worked in terrified silence, winching the trunk and the bullion onto the flatbed, burying them beneath a rusted washing machine Tom had in the back. By 2 in the morning, Unit 402 sat locked behind my padlock, nothing inside but rotting garbage. Meanwhile, millions in gold rolled quietly into the darkness. The next morning, I sat in the cramped, windowless office of Tom's salvage yard. 5 gold bars rested on his steel workbench, fully stripped of their grey primer. They caught the harsh fluorescent light, utterly alien against greasy tools and spare tires. Across from the gold sat David Horowitz, a federal prosecutor Tom knew through old family connections. David was sharp, clinical. He'd spent the last 3 hours meticulously combing through the leather-bound ledger and the typed letter. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 29, underscore, underscore. David said finally, glancing up and adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. I said, my voice cold as concrete. David tapped his pen against the ledger. Quote, 33, quote, 34. I shot back, leaning forward. Quote, 35, quote, 36, David cautioned. Quote, 37, quote, 38. Tom cut in, standing behind me with his arms crossed. Quote, 39. In return, the Federal Bureau of Investigation recognizes Caleb as a good-faith purchaser and confidential informant. He turns over the gold. But you authorize the standard 20% informant and finder's share from the seized assets. That's my price for the ledger, I said. Calm. Steady. David reached his hand across the table, slowly. We have a deal. But first, we need to catch your brother in the act. Prove he orchestrated the proxy bid. My new prepaid phone buzzed. Caller ID showed Derek's name. I answered and hit speaker. Caleb? Derek's voice came through tight, strained with panic, but fighting hard to sound casual. Listen, Brenda and I were talking things over. We feel bad about yesterday. Did you, Derek? Yes. Look, I caught wind of a strange rumour that you picked up an old storage unit on Route 8 yesterday. Unit 402. That true? I looked at David. He gave me a solid nod. Yes, paid $30 for it. Nothing but junk inside. Planning to head over in about an hour and haul everything out. Wait! Derek nearly shouted. Don't throw anything away. I used to rent that unit. There are precious family keepsakes in there. I'll hand you $5,000 cash for that lock key right now. We can meet at the restaurant across the highway. 10,000, I said. Flat. No emotion. Bring it in a briefcase. Done, Derek answered without hesitation. 1 hour later, I sat in a booth at the diner across from Secure All Storage. Derek walked in, looking rattled. He slid into the seat and shoved a fat manila envelope across the table. 10 grand. Hand over the key, Caleb. I didn't touch the envelope. Instead, I reached into my jacket, pulled out a photocopy of that typed letter from the trunk and pushed it toward him. Derek's eyes dropped to the page. The moment he saw his own name, every trace of color vanished from his face. That swagger he'd carried in with him, gone. You sold me out for a payday, I said, barely above a whisper. You wanted me sidelined so you could grab father's dirty money without me looking over your shoulder. Caleb, please, Derek sputtered. His hands were shaking. We can split it. We're brothers. We were brothers yesterday, I said, standing up from the booth. When I was standing in the rain, I walked out of that diner without touching the cash. The second I pushed through those glass doors, 3 unmarked black SUVs rolled into the lot. Federal agents poured out and rushed the building to take him down. I pulled my collar tight against the cold wind and headed for Tom's truck, leaving every piece of my old life behind me. What I carried away from that storage unit was more than money. It was my dignity. Derek lost the house to legal fees. The corrupt officials caught federal indictments. Now I live in a small farmhouse in Medina. Quiet life. Sometimes rock bottom is the only foundation solid enough to build on. $30 bought me a genuine new start. I will never look back.